Oh, hello! I've always enjoyed a good prize fight. Years ago, I even dated a very successful boxer. Oh, he was terribly handsome. But most of all, I admired his courage. He'd faced dozens of strong men in the boxing ring, and he had never lost. One day, we were on a cruise ship heading for Morocco, where he had an exhibition fight. We were eating dinner in the ship's dining room when suddenly alarms started to ring, and the captain's voice echoed everywhere. "Oh, the ship is sinking. Please proceed calmly to the lifeboats." Well, my boxer screamed like a little girl and yelled, "Prize fighters and children first!" And then he pushed past me and everyone else, and he jumped headfirst into the nearest lifeboat, blubbering like a baby the whole time. Well, a few minutes later, after the captain explained that this had just been a practice drill, I realized that there are different kinds of courage, and the kind that my boxer boyfriend, my ex-boxer boyfriend had, was probably not the most important kind. Now, this is the story of a man who goes very far on very little courage. It's called The Brave Little Tailor, and it's by the Brothers Grimm. One summer morning, a little tailor was sitting on his table near the window. In good spirits, he was sewing with all his might. A peasant woman came down the street crying, "Good jam for sale! Good jam for sale!" That sounded good to the little tailor, so he stuck his dainty head out the window and shouted, "Come up here, my dear woman. You can sell your goods here." The woman carried her heavy basket up the 3 flights of stairs to the tailor, who had her unpack all of her jars. He examined them, picking each one up and holding it to his nose, and finally he said, "This jam looks good to me. Weigh out 4 ounces for me, even if it comes to a quarter pound." The woman, who had hoped to make a good sale, gave him what he asked for, and then went away angry and grumbling. "May God bless this jam to give me health and strength," said the little tailor. Then, taking a loaf of bread from his cupboard, he cut himself a large slice and spread it with the jam. "This is not going to taste bad," he said, "but I will finish the jacket before I bite into it." He laid the bread aside and continued his sewing, happily making his stitches larger and larger. Meanwhile, the smell of the sweet jam rose to the wall where a large number of flies were sitting. Attracted by the smell, a swarm of them settled on the bread. "Hey! Who invited you?" said the little tailor, driving away the unbidden guests. However, the flies, who did not understand German, would not be turned away, and they came back in ever-increasing numbers. Finally, losing his temper, he reached for a piece of cloth and shouted, "Wait, now I'm going to give it to you," and then he hit all of them without mercy. And when he backed off and counted, there were no fewer than 7 of them lying dead before him, with their legs stretched out. "Aren't you someone?" he said to himself, surprised at his own bravery. "The whole town should hear about this." He hastily cut out a banner for himself, then embroidered on it with large letters, 7 with 1 blow. "The town," he said further, "the whole world shall hear about this," and his heart jumped for joy like a lamb's tail. The tailor tied the banner around his body and set forth into the world, for he thought that his workshop was too small for such bravery. Before leaving, he looked around his house for something that he could take with him. Finding nothing but a piece of old cheese, he put that into his pocket. Outside the town gate, he found a bird that was caught in a bush. It went into his pocket with the cheese. He bravely took to the road, and being light and agile, he did not grow weary. The road led him up a mountain, and when he reached the top, a huge giant was sitting there, looking around contentedly. The little tailor went up to him cheerfully and said, "Good day, comrade. Are you just sitting here, looking at the wide world? I am on my way out there to prove myself. Do you want to come with me?" The giant looked at the tailor with contempt, saying, "You wretch! You miserable fellow!" "You don't say," answered the little tailor. Unbuttoning his coat, he showed the banner to the giant. "You can read what kind of man I am." The giant read, 7 with 1 blow. and thinking that the tailor had killed 7 men, he gained some respect for the little fellow, but he did want to put him to the test. So he picked up a stone and squeezed it with his hand until water dripped from it. "Do what I just did," said the giant, "if you have the strength." "Oh, is that all?" said the little tailor. "That is child's play for someone like me." Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out the soft cheese and squeezed it until liquid ran from it. "That was even better, wasn't it?" he said. Well, the giant did not know what to say, for he did not believe that the little man could do that. Then the giant picked up a stone and threw it so high that it could scarcely be seen. "Now, you little dwarf, do that." "A good throw," said the tailor, "but the stone did fall back to earth. I'll throw one for you that will not come back." And he reached into his pocket, pulled out the bird, and threw it into the air. Happy to be free, the bird flew up and away and did not come back. "How'd you like that, comrade?" asked the tailor. "You can throw well enough," said the giant, "but now let's see if you're able to carry anything proper." He led the little tailor to a mighty oak tree that had been cut down and was lying on the ground. He said, "If you're strong enough, then help me carry this tree out of the woods." "Gladly," answered the little man. "You take the trunk on your shoulder, and I will carry the branches and the twigs. After all, they are the heaviest." The giant lifted the trunk onto his shoulder, but the tailor sat down on a branch, and the giant, who could not see behind him, had to drag along the entire tree, with the little tailor sitting on top. Cheerful and in good spirits, he whistled the song, "There were 3 tailors who rode out to the gate," as though carrying a tree were child's play. The giant, after dragging the heavy load a little way, could not go on any further, and he called out, "Listen, I have to drop the tree." The tailor jumped down agilely, took hold of the tree with both arms, as though he had been carrying it, and said to the giant, "You're such a big fellow, and you can't even carry a tree." They walked on together until they came to a cherry tree. The giant took hold of the treetop where the ripest fruit was hanging, bent it down, and put it into the tailor's hand, inviting him to eat. However, the little tailor was much too weak to hold the tree, and when the giant let go, the tree sprang upward, throwing the tailor into the air. When he fell back to earth without injury, the giant said, "What? You don't even have enough strength to hold that little switch?" "There's no lack of strength," answered the little tailor. "Do you think that would be a problem for someone who killed 7 with one blow? I jumped over the tree because hunters are shooting down there in the brush. Jump over it yourself if you can." The giant made an attempt but could not clear the tree and got stuck in the branches. So the little tailor kept the upper hand here as well. The giant said, "If you're such a brave fellow, then come with me to our cave and spend the night with us." The little tailor agreed and followed him. When they reached the cave, other giants were sitting there by a fire. Each one had a roasted sheep in his hand and was eating from it. The little tailor looked around and thought, it's a lot more roomy here than in my workshop. The giant showed him a bed and told him to lie down and go to sleep. However, the little tailor found the bed too large, so instead of lying there, he crept into a corner. At midnight, the giant thought that the little tailor was fast asleep, so he got up, took a large iron bar, and with a single blow smashed the bed in 2. He thought he'd put an end to the grasshopper. Early the next morning, the giants went into the woods, having completely forgotten the little tailor, when he suddenly approached them cheerfully and boldly. Fearing that he would strike them all dead, the terrified giants ran away in haste. The little tailor continued on his way, always following his pointed nose. After wandering a long time, he came to the courtyard of a royal palace, and being tired, he lay down in the grass and fell asleep. While he was lying there, people came and looked at him from all sides, and they read his banner, 7 with one blow. "Oh," they said, "what is this great war hero doing here in the midst of peace? He must be a powerful lord." They went and reported him to the king, thinking that if war were to break out, well, he would be an important and useful man who at any price should not be allowed to go elsewhere. The king was pleased with this advice, and he sent one of his courtiers to the little tailor to offer him a position in the army as soon as he woke up. The messenger stood by the sleeper and waited until he stretched his arms and legs and opened his eyes, and then he delivered his offer. "That is precisely why I came here," answered the little tailor. "I am ready to enter the king's service." Thus he was received with honor and given a special palace to live. However, the soldiers were opposed to the little tailor and wished that he were 1,000 miles away. "What will happen," they said among themselves, "if we quarrel with him and he strikes out against us? 7 of us will fall with each blow. People like us can't stand up to that." So they came to a decision, and altogether they went to the king and asked to be released. "We are not made," they said, "to stand up to a man who kills 7 with one blow." The king was sad that he was going to lose all his faithful servants because of one man, and he wished that he had never seen him. He would like to be rid of him, but he did not dare dismiss him because he was afraid that he would kill him and all his people and then set himself on the royal throne. He thought long and hard and finally found an answer. He sent a message to the little tailor, informing him that because he was such a great war hero, he would make him an offer. In a forest in his country, there lived 2 giants who were causing great damage with robbery, murder, pillage, and arson. No one could approach them without placing themselves in mortal danger. If he could conquer and kill these 2 giants, the king would give him his only daughter to wife and half his kingdom for a dowry. Furthermore, 100 horsemen would go with him for support. "This is something for a man like you," thought the little tailor. "It is not every day that someone is offered a beautiful princess and half a kingdom." "Yes," he replied, "I shall conquer the giants, but I do not need the 100 horsemen. Anyone who can strike down 7 with one blow has no cause to be afraid of 2. The little tailor set forth, and the 100 horsemen followed him. At the edge of the forest, he said to them, "You stay here. I shall take care of the giants myself." Leaping into the woods, he looked to the left and to the right. He soon saw the 2 giants. They were lying asleep under a tree, snoring until all the branches bent up and down. The little tailor, not lazy, filled both pockets with stones and climbed the tree. Once in the middle of the tree, he slid out on a branch until he was seated right above the sleepers. Then he dropped 1 stone after another onto one of the giant's chests. For a long time, the giant didn't feel anything, but finally he woke up, shoved his companion, and said, "Why are you hitting me?" "You're dreaming," said the other one. "I'm not hitting you." They fell asleep again, and the tailor threw a stone at the second one. "What is this?" said the other one. "Why are you throwing things at me?" "I'm not throwing anything at you," answered the first one, grumbling. They quarreled for a while, but because they were tired, they made peace, and they both closed their eyes again. Then the little tailor began his game again. Choosing the largest stone, he threw it at the first giant with all his strength, hitting him in the chest. "That is too mean," shouted the giant, then jumped up like a madman and pushed his companion against the tree until it shook. The other one paid him back in kind, and they became so angry that they pulled up trees and struck at each other until finally, at the same time, they both fell to the ground dead. Then the little tailor jumped down. "Well, it is fortunate," he said, "that they did not pull up the tree where I was sitting, or I would have had to jump into another one like a squirrel. But people like me are nimble." Drawing his sword, he gave each one a few good blows to the chest, then went back to the horsemen and said, "The work is done. I finished off both of them, but it was hard. In their need, they pulled up trees to defend themselves, but it didn't help them, not against someone like me, who kills 7 with one blow." "Are you not wounded?" asked the horseman. "Everything's all right," answered the tailor. "They did not so much as bend one of my hairs." Not wanting to believe him, the horseman rode into the woods, And there they found the giants swimming in their own blood, and all around lay the uprooted trees. The little tailor asked the king for the promised reward, but the latter regretted the promise, and once again he began to think of a way to get a hero off his neck. "Before you receive my daughter and half the kingdom," he said, "you must fulfill another heroic deed. In the woods there is a unicorn that is causing much damage. First, you must capture it." "I am even less afraid of a unicorn than I was of two giants. 7 with one blow, that's my thing." Taking a rope and an axe, he went into the woods. Once again he told those who were with him to wait behind. He did not have to look very long. The unicorn soon appeared, leaping toward the tailor as if it wanted to spear him at once. "Gently, gently," said the tailor, "not so fast." He stopped, waited until the animal was very near, then jumped agilely behind a tree, while the unicorn ran with all its might into the tree, sticking its horn so tightly into the trunk that it did not have enough strength to pull it out again, and thus it was captured. "Now, I have the little bird," said the tailor, coming out from behind the tree. First he tied the rope around the unicorn's neck. Then he cut the horn out of the tree with the axe. When everything was ready, he led the animal away and brought it to the king. The king still did not want to give him the promised reward, and presented a third requirement. Before the wedding, the tailor was to capture a wild boar that was causing great damage in the woods. Huntsmen were to assist him. "Gladly," said the tailor. "That is child's play." He did not take the huntsmen into the woods with him, and they were glad about that, for they had encountered the wild boar before and had no desire to do so again. When the boar saw the tailor, he ran toward him with foaming mouth and grinding teeth, wanting to throw him to the ground. But the nimble hero ran into a nearby chapel, and then with one leap jumped out back through a window. The boar ran in after him, but the tailor ran around outside and slammed the door. Thus the furious animal was captured, for it was too heavy and clumsy to jump out the window. The little tailor called to the huntsmen. They had to see the captured boar with their own eyes. The hero reported to the king, who now, whether he wanted to or not, had to keep his promise and give him his daughter and half the kingdom. If he had known that it was not a war hero, but rather a little tailor standing before him, it would have been even more painful for him. The wedding was thus held with great ceremony, but little joy, and a king was made from a tailor. Some time later, the young queen heard in the night how her husband said in a dream, "Boy, make the jacket for me, and patch the trousers, or I will hit you across the ears with a yardstick." Thus she determined where the young lord had come from. The next morning she brought her complaint to her father, asking him to help her get rid of the man who was nothing more than a tailor. The king comforted her, saying, "Tonight you leave your bedroom door unlocked. My servants will stand outside, and after he falls asleep, they will go inside, bind him, and carry him to a ship that will take him far away from here." The wife was satisfied with this. However, the king's squire, who had a liking for the young lord, heard everything and revealed the whole plot to him. "I'll put a stop to this," said the little tailor. That evening, he went to bed with his wife at the usual time. When she thought he was asleep, she got up and opened the door and then went back to bed. The little tailor, who was only pretending to be asleep, began crying out with a clear voice, "Boy, make the jacket for me, and patch the trousers, or I will hit you across the ears with a yardstick. I have struck down 7 with one blow, killed 2 giants, led away a unicorn, and captured a wild boar, and I'm supposed to be afraid of those who are standing just outside the bedroom door?" When those standing outside heard the tailor say this, they were so overcome with fear that they ran away as though the wild horde was behind them. None of them dared to approach him ever again. And thus the little tailor was a king, and he remained a king as long as he lived. The end. You surrender or I'll shoot. No, you surrender or I'll shoot. No, you surrender or I'll... Oh, hello. This is a story about a toy soldier, and it always reminds me of my father because he spent 2 years in the army overseas. And once when I was a little girl, I asked him what was the worst part about fighting in a war. He thought about it, and he said, never knowing what's going to happen next. Well, I thought that was just silly. I said, that's the worst part? What about being away from your loved ones or getting shot at by somebody in a tree or walking 20 miles a day through the mud? What's so bad about not knowing what's going to happen next? He said, it's hard to explain, Doodlebug. Imagine for a moment that you're sitting by a quiet lake on a sunny day. The birds are singing. There's a gentle... Woo! Well, I nearly jumped out of my bloomers. Why'd you scare me like that? I said. That's what it's like, my father said. Every single minute, day and night. You never know when someone or something is suddenly going to go. Boo! And that's when I finally understood, at least a little bit, how bad it must have been for him. It sounds horrible, Papa, I said. You poor thing. And I hugged my father tightly for a long, long time. And then I made him buy me an ice cream cone, some new roller skates, and a BB gun for having scared the stuffing out of a sweet little girl. And now, here's the story of a toy soldier and his absolutely amazing adventures. It's The Brave Tin Soldier by Hans Christian Andersen. There was once 25 tin soldiers who were all brothers, for they had been made out of the same old tin spoon. They shouldered arms and looked straight before them and wore a splendid uniform, red and blue. The first thing in the world they ever heard were the words, "Tin soldiers," uttered by a little boy who clapped his hands with delight when the lid of the box was opened. They were given him for a birthday present, and he stood at the table to set them up. The soldiers were all exactly alike, excepting one who had only one leg. He'd been left to the last, and then there was not enough of the melted tin to finish him, so they made him to stand firmly on one leg, and this caused him to be very remarkable. The table on which the tin soldier stood was covered with other playthings, but the most attractive to the eye was a pretty little paper castle. Through the small windows the rooms could be seen. In front of the castle, a number of little trees surrounded a piece of looking-glass, which was intended to represent a transparent lake. Swans, made of wax, swam on the lake and reflected in it. All this was very pretty, but the prettiest of all was a tiny little lady who stood at the open door of the castle. She also was made of paper, and she wore a dress of clear muslin, and with a narrow velvet ribbon over her shoulders just like a scarf. In front of these was fixed a glittering tinsel rose as large as her whole face. The little lady was a dancer, and she stretched out both her arms and raised one of her legs so high that the tin soldier could not see it at all, and he thought that she, like himself, had only one leg. This is the wife for me, he thought. But she's too grand and lives in a castle, while I have only a box to live in. 25 of us all together. That is no place for her. Still, I must try and make her acquaintance. Then he laid himself at full length on the table behind a snuff box that stood upon it, so that he could peep at the little delicate lady, who continued to stand on one leg without losing her balance. When evening came, the other tin soldiers were all placed in the box, and the people of the house went to bed. Then the playthings began to have their own games together, to pay visits, to have sham fights, and to give balls. The tin soldiers rattled in their box. They wanted to get out and join the amusement, but they could not open the lid. The nutcrackers played at leapfrog, and the pencil jumped about the table. There was such a noise that the canary woke up and began to talk, and in poetry too. Only the tin soldier and the dancer remained in their places. She stood on tiptoe, with her legs stretched out as firmly as he did on his one leg. He never took his eyes from her for even a moment. clock struck 12, and with a bounce, up sprang the lid of the snuff box. But instead of snuff, there jumped up a little black goblin, for the snuff box was a toy puzzle. "Tin soldier," said the goblin, "don't wish for what does not belong to you." But the tin soldier pretended not to hear. "Very well, wait till tomorrow then," said the goblin. When the children came in the next morning, they placed the tin soldier in the window. Now, whether it was the goblin who did it or the draught is not known, but the window flew open and out fell the tin soldier, heels over head, from the third story into the street beneath. It was a terrible fall, for he came head downwards. His helmet and his bayonet stuck in between the flagstones, and his one leg up in the air. The servant maid and the little boy went downstairs directly to look for him, but he was nowhere to be seen. Although once they nearly trod upon him, if he had called out, "Here I am," well, it would have been all right, but he was too proud to cry out for help while he wore a uniform. Presently it began to rain, and the drops fell faster and faster till there was a heavy shower. When it was over, two boys happened to pass by, and one of them said, "Look, there's a tin soldier. He ought to have a boat to sail in." So they made a boat out of newspaper and placed the tin soldier in it and sent him sailing down the gutter, while the two boys ran by the side of it and clapped their hands. Good gracious, what large waves arose in that gutter, and how fast the stream rolled on, for the rain had been very heavy. The paper boat rocked up and down and turned itself round sometimes so quickly that the tin soldier trembled, yet he remained firm. His countenance did not change. He looked straight before him and shouldered his musket. Suddenly the boat shot under a bridge which formed a part of a drain, and then it was as dark as the tin soldier's box. "Where am I going now?" thought he. "This is the black goblin's fault, I'm sure. Well, if the little lady were only here with me in the boat, I should not care for any darkness." Suddenly there appeared a great water rat who lived in the drain. "Have you a passport?" asked the rat. "Give it to me at once." But the tin soldier remained silent and held his musket tighter than ever. The boat sailed on, and the rat followed it. Oh, how he did gnash his teeth and cry out to the bits of wood and straw, "Stop him! Just stop him! He's not paid toll and has not shown his pass." But the stream rushed on, stronger and stronger. The tin soldier could already see daylight shining where the arch ended. Then he heard a roaring sound, quite terrible enough to frighten the bravest man, and at the end of the tunnel the drain fell into a large canal over a steep place, which made it as dangerous for him as a waterfall would be to us. He was too close to it to stop, so the boat rushed on, and the poor tin soldier could only hold himself as stiffly as possible, without moving an eyelid to show that he was not afraid. The boat whirled around 3 or 4 times, and then filled with water to the very edge. Nothing could save it from sinking. He now stood up to his neck in the water, while deeper and deeper sank the boat, and the paper became soft and loose with the wet, till at last the water closed over the soldier's head. He thought of the elegant little dancer whom he should never see again, and the words of the song sounded in his ears. "Farewell, warrior ever brave, drifting onward to thy grave." Then the paper boat fell to pieces, and the soldier sank into the water, and immediately afterwards was swallowed up by a great fish. Oh, how dark it was inside the fish! A great deal darker than in the tunnel, and narrower too. But the tin soldier continued firm, and lay at full length, shouldering his musket. The fish swam to and fro, making the most wonderful movements. But at last he became quite still. After a while, a flash of lightning seemed to pass through him, and then the daylight approached, and a voice cried out, "I declare, here is the tin soldier!" The fish had been caught, taken to the market, and sold to the cook, who took him into the kitchen and cut him open with a large knife. She picked up the soldier and held him by the waist between her finger and thumb, and carried him into the room. They were all anxious to see this wonderful soldier who had travelled about inside a fish. But he was not at all proud. They placed him on the table, and How many curious things do happen in the world! There he was in the very same room from the window of which he had fallen. There were the same children, the same playthings, standing on the table, and the pretty castle with the elegant little dancer at the door. She still balanced herself on one leg and held up the other, so she was as firm as himself. It touched the tin soldier so much to see her that he almost wept in tears. But he kept them back. He only looked at her, and they both remained silent. Presently, one of the little boys took up the tin soldier and threw him into the stove. He had no reason for doing so, therefore it must have been the fault of the black goblin who lived in the snuff-box. The flames lighted up the tin soldier as he stood. The heat was very terrible, but whether it proceeded from the real fire or from the fire of love, he could not tell. Then he could see that the bright colours were faded from his uniform, but whether they had been washed off during the journey or from the effects of his sorrow, no one could say. He looked at the little lady, and she looked at him. He felt himself melting away, but he still remained firm with his gun on his shoulder. Suddenly, the door of the room flew open, and the draught of air caught up the little dancer. She fluttered like a sylph right into the stove by the side of the tin soldier, and was instantly in flames and gone. The tin soldier melted down into a lump, and the next morning, when the maid-servant took the ashes out of the stove, she found him in the shape of a little tin heart. But the little dancer, nothing remained, but the tinsel rose, which was burnt black as a cinder. The end.